It seems like a fine line here, Simon, because we've spoken about in the past how people accept that we need to have lower levels of migration because that is putting pressure on the housing market. That's not, attacking migrant groups. That's just kind of an economic structure as a whole. And that seems to be quite popular, would you say, from the feedback from the focus groups?
That's right. So talking about migration numbers broadly and even talking about, wanting to increase skilled migration, that's quite a, as you say, quite a popular and sort of reasonable argument. It's when political parties are seen to then venture into, certain migrant groups or, certain categories of migrants from certain countries, those sorts of things, certain religions. Once you venture into that territory, that's where you really run into trouble, and that's where the groups are pushing back very hard on that kind of narrative. But it's not just about migrants; it's about any vulnerable group in society. There is a far stronger identification with them now because, as I say, we're all seem to be on the sort of this boot end of government policy that's not addressing the real problems that we're all facing at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting when we look at the climate debate that has come up just over the weekend. Labor has had great success in proven electoral success in painting, the coalition, Peter Dutton, as a party that don't really believe in Paris and don't really believe in tackling climate change. But has all of that changed now? Because I feel like it has. If Labor think that climate is going to be the number one issue going into the election ahead of cost of living, I think that's naive at best. But I also think that voters are a little bit more aware of what is and isn't achievable. Is that fair? And I'm thinking about when it comes to achieving those Paris targets by 2030, Simon. I mean, the UN says no G20 nation is on track. We're in that list.
Yeah. I'll leave the achievement side of it to the climate scientists, but the electoral politics of it is actually really interesting. So there's probably, other than cost of living, there probably is no single issue that would carry the day for either side of politics at the moment. I mean, if you could do something amazing, wave the magic wand on cost of living, then absolutely. But climate still has particular political resonance in some really key electorates. So I'm thinking obviously the teal electorates, and I'm thinking those sort of middle Australia, high educated, formerly once safe-ish Liberal seats that are now held by Labor. So your Bennelongs, those sorts of things, that seats in WA, Swan, Curtin, those sorts of places that have also fallen to the teals. It still resonates there. So while the Liberals might have this strategy of turning to the outer suburbs, you've still got to remember Labor's sitting on some pretty healthy margins in a lot of the seats that they're talking about in that space. So to get to government, they still need to pick back up some of those teal seats, to pick up some of those seats that they lost last time round.
Yeah.
This kind of policy does not help them do that. In fact, it makes that mountain even higher.
Yeah, really interesting. What about the news poll today that did a bit of word association into strength of leadership? Have you done this kind of research? This news poll essentially showed that Peter Dutton has some new strengths that he hadn't had 3 years ago. These are Anthony Albanese's likeable, in touch with voters, cares for people, trustworthy. But when it came to Peter Dutton, he's experienced, decisive and strong, gets major issues and has a vision for Australia. Is that broadly in line with what you've seen in these groups?
Yeah, that's not far off. It's not far off. But what really matters to voters is what they think you will do with those strengths.
Right.
So you can be decisive and strong, but if voters think that you're going to make decisions against their interests and be strong at enforcing those decisions against their interests, then you've got a problem. And that's where, going back to that previous conversation about climate, for example, I don't think there'd be any voters sitting in those now Labor-held or Teal-held seats that would have any doubt that Peter Dutton will implement what he said there. But also on Albanese's side, it's nice to be likeable, it's nice to be warm, but what do you actually do with that? And that, of course, has been the big narrative we've been discussing over the last 12 months, that he seems to be a likeable enough bloke, but he's not doing anything. So yeah, it's where you take that stuff is probably the more important thing than than even sort of those sort of surface level kind of descriptions that voters are applying.
Simon, fascinating as always. We will see you soon.
Thanks, Laura.